Welcome back, Honors. Oh, man. Great class today. Was really enjoying it. But what we're going to do today is just kind of get as far as we can with the time that I have allowed. So as of right now, I've got about, give or take, about 9-ish minutes, 8-9 minutes of time left that I can actually flip this bad boy. So let's get right after it, shall we? Now, anyway, so this way it'll actually just get us a little further in the content so we can keep going. So today in class we talked already about geographic isolationism. We talked about the eight time periods, right? We're going to bang out the easy ones right now. We'll probably get about halfway through the Minoans. We got some myths we got to talk about tomorrow and things like that. But let's get after it, shall we? So we stopped here in class today when we talked about how the mountainous terrain of Greece divided a lot of the early settlements. That's that word that we talked about, geographic isolationism, right? The idea that this mountainous terrain kept these early settlements away from each other, leading to very, very unique cultures. We talked about a couple of different places that exist in the modern day that have very unique cultures. Is my tie bar even? All right, cool. Anyway, now. And kind of talked, oh, by the way, I'm supposed to shout out and say that Jill Orcutt would like me to send a message to Leah that she is better than you. So I was told to say that. Now, really quick. Also, we talked about how the Aegean Sea borders early Greece and how the early establishment of their natural harbors actually led to a lot of early trade with the Greeks, right? Cultural diffusion is going to be huge in the early ancient Greek time periods, right? So, Greece is bordered by the sea that has a lot of great natural harbors. The sea also has many islands inside of it that offer contact with other civilizations in terms of trade, sometimes war, right? The climate in Greece is about an average of 75 degrees Fahrenheit, not Celsius, because then you'd be, like, burned off the face of the earth. But here's the one big thing about them. Their farmland is atrocious, like really bad. Really, 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 really bad. They actually only have 20% available farmland in all of Greece, right? So what does that tell you? That they're going to depend heavily on a lot of trade to try and get the items that they need to sustain their environment. They weren't dependent on a lot of surplus early on. They were dependent much more upon trade, moving items from one place to another, which is going to make them very culturally advanced very, very quickly, right? So anyway, also, the farmland is going to lead to them being a much more seafaring civilization, right? So just keep those things in mind. 20% farmland, so bad. Actually, one of the only indigenous animals that can live in that area, in that terrain, due to the limited amount of vegetation, are goats and lamb, which is actually why it's a big part of their cuisine. So anyway, now, really, really quick, though, let's talk about the two simple ones that don't need that much time. So anyway, getting into it, the Neolithic period is the first one, right? The Neolithic era is when artifacts started showing early settlements, right? So people began to farm, they began to settle in, they actually began to come together as small units, and all of the artifacts that we have from this period are, of course, the stuff that you see every single archaeologist looking at all the time. It's a lot of pot, as in things you hold stuff in. Scumbags. Now, anyway, so a lot of pots, a lot of farming. It's like a lot of evidence of farming, early things like that. Actually, also really cool, though, some evidence of early religious themes, right? We actually have some small figurines right here. One's the fertility goddess, we believe. Maybe possibly some small busts or early forms of art. Very, very important stuff. Now, moving forward, though, then we got into the early Bronze Age, right? Now, jot this down really, really quick before we ever even get there. So if we actually have to talk about it later on, there are two big time periods in the ancient period. There is the early Bronze Age, the Bronze Age collapse. Well, actually, you can call it three. The Bronze Age collapse is actually more of an event, all right? So the early Bronze, or there's the Bronze Age collapse, and then there's the Age of Iron, all right? The Iron Age, right? So, but early Greeks were bronze people, right? So 29,000 to 2000 BC, actually going even further when you talk about the fact that the Minoans and the Mycenaeans are actually also Bronze Age individuals, when we get to them in about 2 seconds. But that period was defined by the introduction of bronze, right? Probably traded some with the Egyptians, probably traded some with Hyksos and people like that, getting access to these early types of metals. It was used to create weapons, pots, armor, a lot of different stuff. But now we got to get into the first Westerners, right? The actual first Western people, the very unique first Westerners, right? So they're the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, right? So those are the early Greeks, right? The early Greeks. So what happened is these two settlements, well, one of these settlements popped up on this small island out here in the Mediterranean Sea, the island of Crete. Now, really quick, some of you are like, well, how did they get there? We're not really positive. We believe there's a chance that they were settlers from mainland Peloponnese, possibly looking for more area for natural harbors, things like that. They were master shipbuilders, which actually helps them out a lot. So probably the island of Crete was just one of the most tangible places they could actually set up on. But there's a lot of different theories. Some people believe that they may have been possibly settled by the Phoenicians. Some people believe they may have possibly been settled by the Ionians. But we're just not quite sure. Now, anyway, but they settled on Crete, right? The Minoan period goes from about 2000 BC to about 1500 BC. And we don't know a ton about them. We only know a small amount about this great civilization. However, their artifacts and their art give us like a glimpse into how they lived their lives, right? So let's keep going real quick, all right? Now, big things we know about them. First of all, they did have a writing system, right? So they did have a system that they created known as Linear A, right? So Linear A also cannot be translated current day. Some historians believe that it actually shares a lot of emblematic things with early Phoenician alphabets and things like that. So some people believe that we may be able to partially translate it. I disagree. I think, honestly, that Minoan writing Linear A format is just borderline intangible, right? So, and this is an example of it right here. And this particular artifact, the crazy thing about it is it actually goes from the middle outward, right? They're actually going middle and then going all the way out. Now, some of you are like, well, if there's Linear A, is there Linear B? Yes, Ryan, there is Linear B, but we haven't gotten there yet, right? So, but Linear A is their form of writing. Now, the Minoan period, also the legacy that they gave us is they were the big first Western ship makers, right? Probably learned these early ideas from the Phoenicians. Their legacy, though, is master shipbuilders and explorers of the sea, right? They explored a lot of the archipelagos outside of Greece in the Aegean, and however, did not do something that archaic Greeks did, which is colonize. Probably just due to limited resources or due to limited numbers of people, but they were master shipbuilders. Very big-time traders as well. So, keep going, though. Also, this is a really, really cool thing. We believe they actually had organized sport long before the Olympics ever even existed. They actually had this thing called bull leaping, which is really, really cool. So bull leaping, we get this from a fresco that's inside of the palace that we're about to talk about in like 2 seconds, which is actually both a sport and a religious ceremony, we believe. So now, speaking of that, you will see the combination of these things as time goes on. Ancient Greeks believe sport is a way to honor the gods, right? It's not sport for sport's sake. It's a way to honor the gods, right? That's why it's called the Olympics, because it was held at the bottom of Mount Olympus to try and honor the gods that were believed to live on top of them. But bull leaping is pretty interesting. From what we have derived from frescoes that are actually inside the Palace of Knossos, the ceremony looks as though people are literally trying to jump over the bull, much like bullfighting in a way. However, ironically enough, in bullfighting in Spain and England, places like that, well, it's called bull baiting in England. But the bull actually ended up dying, but we're not positive if that happened in this situation or not. They're also called the Minoans because they actually believe the bull to be a religious animal, a religious figure, all right? So, excuse me, which is actually kind of funny when you actually look at the parallels between like Hinduism and a lot of early other religions. However, ironically enough, the Hindus probably would have been so geographically isolated at this point behind the Himalayas that the chances of them actually like communicating would have been like slim to none. So anyway, now the funny part about it is like basically this is me right here jumping and doing a backflip off of the bull, and then whoever this is up front, I'm going to go ahead and say it's probably Michael. You know, Michael's over here getting gored by the bull, and back here is Denahi just clapping it up, saying, "Good job, Mr. Terry." Anyway, now, so really, really quick though, this is another bull jumping fresco at the Palace of Knossos. Speaking of the Palace of Knossos is very important. Knossos is actually a great palace and a city that was home to the legendary King Minos. Now, notice I said legendary, right? Because the only real physical account we have of him is actually from a myth that involves this particular palace and the style of which it was built in. So it was the political center of the Minoan Kingdom, and it was actually built in the style of a labyrinth. Now, the historical community is split as to the reason why it was built in the style of the labyrinth. Some historians believe that there's a good to solid chance that it was to protect the king, make it hard to get to him, make it hard to get out. And other people believe, actually, historically speaking, architecturally, that it just made more sense. The more walls you have, the more load it can bear, the larger we can build this building, right? So we will pick up right here because the bell's going to ring on me in 4, 3, 2, and 1. So I gotta go, all right? But I'll talk to you guys a little bit more about this stuff tomorrow. We're gonna tell a story about what lives inside of the labyrinth, as according to legend. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Del Rey and Gianna. We'll get into that tomorrow, though, all right? So we'll see y'all then. Have a great evening.